what's up DIYers? Mike Boards with the Mike Boards channel. Thank you for watching. We're working on a Mercruiser outdrive, and this is part one of the lower unit rebuild. Let's get started. All right, DIYers, at the Craftsman workstation now, and on the left-hand side on the stand is our upper unit. Hey, if you're joining us from the previous videos where we rebuilt the entire upper unit, so happy to have you. If you have not checked those out, definitely check out the links down below in the comment section as well as the description section. A lot of helpful videos on rebuilding that upper unit. However, what we've done is we have shifted the upper unit schematic paperwork to the side and placed the lower unit schematic paperwork. And we are going to follow this to the T. To the right side on the lower unit stand, there is our lower unit. We are going to begin the project. At this point, I've repositioned the lower unit and stand as shown here. And DIYers, I am referencing my exact serial number service manual and following the exact disassembly or rebuild steps. If yours is different, I highly recommend following your specific service manual. And with that said, we'll start with this shaft here. This is our drive shaft. And you've got your prop shaft down below. And right here are your splines. And this little machine cutout is for a rubber O-ring. And if you take your lower unit apart from your upper unit and you're missing an O-ring, chances are it could be stuck in your vertical gear that is inside your upper unit. And for your convenience, here is our old vertical gear that came out of our upper unit during the rebuild process. And that part right there feeds on right there. The O-ring might be in there. However, what I recommend is just get a replacement O-ring. They're probably less than $2. From here, I've got a couple sockets, a 1/2, a 7/16, and a 5/16 to remove the nuts and hardware from the upper housing. Get a little closer, and here's the 1/2 inch. I will remove this 1/2 inch nut first, and it should be very friendly to come off. You should not have to really tug at it. Do your best not to drop these. That would not be good. And it looks like it is a nut and a washer. Carefully remove those. And there it is. From here, let's remove the 2 7/16 nuts. And just like the 1/2 inch, the 2 7/16 nuts have washers. Go ahead and remove both the nut and washer. Careful again. Try not to drop them and lose them. And to the back side to remove that second 7/16 nut and washer. Next, the little 5/16 bolt. Careful as you maneuver the socket in place. You may not be able to get a socket on it. You may need to revert to a wrench due to the shape and clearance of the housing. However, be patient and careful with it. Do not strip it unless you're replacing this 5/16 bolt altogether. And it's come loose pretty easily. And there is what that one looks like. Very unique. From here, we can carefully remove the water tube. It should just pop right out. And this acts as a guide. Set these aside. Next, direct your attention to the upper portion of the water pump housing where it meets the bottom portion of the shaft. And your setup may have a rubber O-ring or seal here. If it does, carefully shift it up the shaft and over the splines and off. And from here, we can carefully shift the upper water pump housing up. Just carefully rock it back and forth. And it comes right up and off. There's the inside. And what I recommend is take a picture of the impeller and how it is positioned as far as the fins or blades. We have to insert the new impeller the exact same way so it rotates properly for proper cooling of your engine. After setting the top portion of the housing aside, you've got this key on the lower portion of your shaft. Carefully remove that. That's all it looks like. Do not drop it or lose it. Set that in a safe location. After that, we will carefully remove this upper gasket. And you may need to use both hands to get it over the thread. Might get bound up, but that came off pretty easily. Next, you have a metal plate gasket. You got these little tabs here. You got to pull this up and over those tabs and rock it back and forth and up and off. And when it comes time to reinstall that, take note of that little indent right there. And this little part right there, that little notch or cutout, that's circular. That goes in that bottom portion there. Next, the bottom gasket. And if you rip these, no worries because you should get replacement gaskets in your kit. And at this point, DIYers, we have now gained access to the lower base of the water pump housing. And in most cases, when you are doing an impeller replacement, you do not replace the lower base of the housing. However, if you buy a full replacement kit, it will come with a base. So with that said, for your convenience, we are going to continue and remove that base. Coming to the back side, and what we need to do is separate the lower base from the gasket down below. A couple ways to do this. I've grabbed some cardboard here. And the last thing you want to do is scratch or dent any portion of your lower unit case or shell. And right here, I'm going to carefully position those pieces of cardboard. I've got a long Craftsman flathead. I will place the screw tip underneath the portion of the base that the long 5/16 screw or bolt goes into, and I'll just carefully tap it and separate that base from the lower gasket. Looks like we've made progress. From here, I just got some pliers, and I'll carefully continue rocking that base back and forth and pulling up on that base to pull it up and off the shaft. I may need both hands. And as you just saw, this base was holding on for dear life. However, those pliers came in very handy. Just shift the base up and off and set that aside, and we will carefully remove the lower gasket. Gets caught up on the thread. The base is now fully removed, and here is a closer top view of what's underneath the base of the water pump housing. And continuing on with part one, we are going to shift our direction to the lower prop shaft and continue removing the prop shaft, bearing carrier, and all the internal gears. At this point, I've got the lower unit resting on the stand on the larger Craftsman workbench, and the stand is perfect for stationary use. Basically, in other words, when the lower unit is removed from the upper unit and just resting on the stand and not being touched. However, with our continued steps in our project, we may be tugging at it pretty aggressively, hopefully not, but possibly with that tool right there to remove the retainer nut and using the puller jaws to remove the internal bearing carrier. So what I'm going to do is secure this lower unit to the stand much more firmly by use of tie straps. I'll show you the end result. And here's what I've done. Again, I used a tie strap. I also used one single bungee cord, and protecting that lower skag at all times, did my best to secure the lower unit to the stand without allowing any of the tie strap nor the bungee cord to touch that skag. Any additional pressure on that skag, you could actually damage it, and that's not what we want. And you will notice right back there, again, the tie strap is not touching the skag. And coming up top, here's where I've got the tie strap looping over and protecting the surface up top. I used a piece of cardboard and again, just tightened it right here. And that is on there pretty firmly. From here, what I'm going to do is spray some PB Blaster, allow it to sit overnight, and hopefully loosen up any corrosion or rust inside this lower unit and the retainer nut. I went ahead and placed some paper towel, and I'm going to remove the thrust washer. Set that aside. And I'm going to not overdo it. No need to get messy. However, I want to spray in between the gap of the retainer nut and the casing of the lower unit. And you'll notice it kind of flows downward, which is good. I may give it a couple more sprays over the next couple hours. And again, let it sit overnight, and we will attack this in the morning. And actually, while we wait, I want to talk about these little machine circle cuts or indents into the retainer nut. These are machine cut by the manufacturer, and these act as drill points. In the event that you cannot remove retainer nut or loosen it using that tool, they give you specific drill points to drill into and weaken the crown or retainer nut to allow you to chip it and break it into a couple pieces and remove it. And by giving you those drill points, it helps alleviate you from damaging the thread that's on the inner portion of this case. In addition, you've got a locking tab that we need to use a flathead screwdriver and bend down and backwards or rearward away from us and out of the way of the rotation of the retainer nut, and that is going to allow us to unscrew the retainer nut. And I'll try to give you a good view of this as I do it. Again, insert the flathead screwdriver, carefully apply some pressure, and shift that tab down. And it went down just a bit. What I'll do is grab some pliers here. I'm sure there's an easier way to do this, but this is how I'm doing it. It's coming down slowly but surely. Quick update, I actually had to grab some muscle. I grabbed the 2-pound Tecton, and I'm going to position the screwdriver on the tab and just do a couple friendly taps. From here, let's take a closer look of the tab itself. And as you can see, it is behind or pushed back and out of the way from the rotation of that retainer nut. All right, DIYers, back with you. We let it sit overnight, and a couple tools. We've got a ratchet and socket, 11/16 size, got a rubber mallet, and we've got a Craftsman impact wrench or gun, just in case. We may or may not need that. And that tool. I'll reposition the camera and try to remove that retainer nut. Again, verify your locking tab on the tab washer is pushed back and out of the way of the rotation of the retainer nut. This tool has these little teeth on it. Carefully slide it onto the shaft without damaging the splines. And there it is, in and locked. And I will use the 11/16 and I will begin giving it some friendly taps with the rubber mallet. And DIYers, as you can see, that retainer nut is holding on for dear life. From here, I'm going to transition to the impact gun. Let's give it a try. And as you just saw, as we're doing this, the lower unit and stand are shifting, so I just shifted it back in place, and we'll give it a couple more seconds on the impact. Well, DIYers, like I just said, it is hanging on for dear life, and we're going to have to drill. I'm using my Craftsman drill, and I've got the 9/64 bit. I'll reposition the camera and start drilling. And again, you have specific drill points per the service manual of the manufacturer. And we are going to start at the bottom. And again, as you do this, do your absolute best to drill in the dead center of that circle and stay away from the thread of the inner portion of this lower unit insert. At this point, we have drilled 3 holes, and we are going to vacuum up all those shavings. In addition, if you plan on keeping the internal bearing carrier, do your absolute best not to drill into it or drill past the retainer nut. As you saw, I just vacuumed and I stepped it up to a 7/32 drill bit. I'm going to make each of these holes larger, and as I do this, I'm going to be careful that I do not damage or scratch the shaft, nor damage the internal thread, as I mentioned. And as you can see, I've made my 4th cut, 2 on the bottom and 2 on the top. Instructions say now grab a chisel and chisel it out. Next, I grab the Craftsman chisel. I've got a 2-pound Tecton hammer, and I'll do my absolute best to give you a good view of this and protect your internal thread at all times, as well as the shaft and the internal bearing carrier. That's if you are reusing that. In our case, we are not, so it doesn't matter for us. And line it up in the center. At this point, I've worked with all 4 holes, and there are additional holes in the event that you want to drill, but we are now going to kind of play with the prongs throughout the inner side of the retainer nut and begin tapping or chiseling to break it loose. I switched to a smaller flathead screwdriver, and again, just be careful, protect that thread. All right. And to the retainer nut. And from here, we are going to grab a pick tool and remove the inner locking ring. Nothing fancy, just a pick tool from my local AutoZone. Grab one of the teeth, and it should just come right out. There it is. Take a lot of photos as you remove all your parts. And a close-up with the inner locking ring removed. What we'll do next is hook up the puller jaws and remove that bearing carrier. Next, I took a few minutes and cleaned the workbench up. Here is the box and part number for the puller that's going to pull the bearing carrier. Down below in the comment section, as well as the description section, is a link to purchase this. What we'll do is open up the box and show you what it looks like. Here it is out of the box. There are 4 parts, and as you can see, it just slides on the top brace or mid brace, and then you've got that long bolt, and this right here, you can see the shape of it, and depending on how your bearing carrier is positioned will depend on which way the puller teeth or jaws at the very end or tip will be positioned on the middle brace there. Next, I spent a minute and screwed that large bolt through the upper brace, and the very tip of it is a ball bearing, and that is going to go right in the tip of the propeller shaft. And again, the position of your jaws will depend on your bearing carrier. In our case, 1989, we have a later style Alpha 1. The jaws or teeth will be facing to the outer portion of the lower unit. I'll set it up and show you what it looks like. Here it is just prior to going into position and being tightened down. And again, the large bolt, the upper brace here, and these slide, and on the back side are little indents for your screws to screw into and secure each of these jaw legs. Puller is now in position inside the carrier as well as on the propeller shaft, Very important, when you are inserting these legs, the teeth at the very tip must be 100% flush with the inner portion of the carrier. In our case, because we have a later style facing outward, yours will be facing inward in the event that you have an earlier style. In other words, don't just have the teeth halfway on, because when you begin cranking this with your ratchet, once it gets to a certain pressure, it will snap right off, and that would not be good. And these right here, 7/16 bolts or screws, and again, they go into a little slot right there. From here, I'll grab my 1/2 inch and I'll push that in and secure it. And DIYers, just go slow, be patient, no need to rush this. And it's probably going to make a bunch of weird noises as it begins to loosen and come out. And if this method does not work, I may need to grab the impact wrench. Quick update, not sure if you heard that, as I was tightening the puller, to actually crack the outer portion of the carrier. So I took the puller off. I'm going to apply some heat, reposition the puller, and possibly shift to the impact. I applied heat for about 5 minutes, and now I'm going to use my Craftsman impact. We'll see what happens. And another update, as you can see, it's not going well. But we'll continue. We got to get that out. All right, DIYers, here we go again. I'm going to transition back to the ratchet. And another update, the upper portion or top left portion just cracked. I'm actually going to collapse or break these portions of the carrier and chip away at the outer surface of the carrier. And then I'll be able to carefully rock the shaft back and forth and hopefully break loose the rear portion of the carrier. And coming in, I've drilled 2 7/32 holes. I'm going to chisel that away and collapse that portion of the carrier. And as I do this, I will again be very careful not to damage the inner thread. I now have a hole cut on the left-hand side as well as down below, and I will continue chiseling that outer ring of the carrier out. We are making significant progress, as you can see. We are destroying that carrier, but hey, we have to, DIYers, to get that out. A+ to the Craftsman drill and drill bits. They destroyed that thing. And there it is so far. Look at all that. I'm going to clean up and continue. All cleaned up once again, and bent some screwdrivers and broke one in the process. Check that out. And there's the front portion or top portion of the carrier closest to the prop. And DIYers, this is the absolute worst case scenario, literally. And in a way, I'm actually glad this happened because, hey, I get to show you the worst case scenario. And I'm going to come inside the carrier. And deep inside there, again, it is very corroded, very rusted. We're going to spray some PV Blaster, let it sit overnight. Thought I'd give you a view of the inside. All PV Blastered up. Again, very rusted and corroded. We need to allow this to sit overnight. All right, it is now the next morning, and I had enough. I threw it in the garbage. No, I'm just joking. Here's what I did. I took the upper unit off the stand here, placed it in a safe location, and I actually had to reinstall the water pump and impeller to allow me to build pressure with my hand pump pressure kit there. I'll show you that here shortly. And I've got a rubber portion over the oil feed line and a C-clamp and a piece of rubber down in between the lower portion of the lower unit here and the C-clamp. And without connected to the upper unit, the lower unit standing on this stand gets a little squirrely, so I use tie straps to secure it. I'm going to reposition it up and continue the project. Now up on the workbench here, and I just want to show you the connection fitting, basically where you connect the gear oil to fill the lower unit. And as far as this hand pump kit, the link scrolling above right now will give you a better description of this. However, I do have 5 pounds of pressure right now. Pressure release, I will release it. And all I'm going to do now is fill it up between 20 and 30 to add some pressure to the backside of that carrier to help push it out. You can see it begin to register. And again, we're adding pressure to the backside of the carrier to hopefully help push it out. All right now it is at 25 pounds. Here's a view inside, and as you can see, the rear portion of the carrier, it is beginning to bubble, so that's a good sign. And before I start aggressively trying to move this propeller shaft to break it loose, I'm going to apply heat to the back side of the carrier. From here, I really don't have much to lose. I have to get that carrier out, and I will be replacing the propeller shaft, so we're just gonna bang away. Back to the inner portion of the lower unit, and that is the upper rear portion of the carrier, and the hitting with the hammer tends to be paying off. And I can hear some air coming, so that's good. We'll keep at it. And I continued for about 5 to 10 minutes trying to shift that shaft back and forth to loosen it, but unfortunately, no luck. And I tried the puller. Once again, no luck. From here, I may not have any other option but to drill the back portion or inner portion or base of the carrier. However, before that, I'm going to release the pressure because once I drill the back side of that carrier, I won't have any chance or way to pressurize it. Might as well remove this. Yep, DIYers, here we go. How fun is this? And do your best not to touch any portion of the thread as well as the case. After about 10 to 15 minutes of drilling, I've got 5 holes, and I'm going to chisel that portion away, and a lot of metal shavings. Look at that. And are you ready for an update? I've been at this for about an hour and a half, and look at all those aluminum shavings from the internal or rear portion of the carrier. And those are the pieces that I actually had to chisel out. And here's what I've come to realize. This lower unit as well as upper unit, basically the entire outdrive, experienced some pretty heavy overheating. And as I was rebuilding the upper unit, this is the water pocket cover. And as you can see, it is badly melted. And that is a part that assists in the cooling of your engine and basically ties into the upper water tube for your impeller and water pump. So as I was trying to remove this, what I realized is that rear and outer ring of the carrier or base of the carrier basically seized and melted in place to the case, which was terrible. I had to do some serious drilling. And again, it took me about an hour and a half. And basically what I did was made several drill points or holes. And let me scroll in here. Here's a closer view of the upper portion. What I was doing was drilling holes as close to each other as possible and then using the flathead screwdriver and hammering out the inner portion here. And that basically created a gap where I can then insert the flathead screwdriver here, give it a couple taps, and it would break this free from the case. And as you can see, I've begun to tackle this side here, and on the other side it's completely gone. And now what I've noticed is I have broke it loose. The oil is coming out, and I did drain the oil, but there might be just a little bit left in there. And now back to the original plan of just kind of carefully rocking the shaft back and forth. And I do see that the carrier now is completely loose on the back. And unfortunately, of course it's not coming out by hand. I may have to re-secure the puller. And you want to know something funny? I'm actually glad I have to re-secure this puller, so it makes me feel like I did not waste my money. And it is coming out now. And there is the rear gear. I'm just catching all this oil right now, or gear lube, with the towel. Next, I placed a cup to catch the remaining gear lube that is going to leak out of the lower unit. You can see that clutch dog, additional gears, including your pinion gear. And here it is. And these parts right here, basically were the parts that I chipped away. And these were basically corroded and melted to the inner portion of the case. And this was one of the hardest, actually let me rephrase that, this was by far the hardest part that I had to remove from a boat or jet ski over the years. That was not fun, but we are rebuilding the entire unit, so we had to do it. And again, you've got the gear on the back side. All of this will be brand new. As far as your gear, chances are you are not replacing it. Double check all the teeth, check the overall condition of the gear, and again, all the teeth. And look at that. Total destruction. I don't know how many holes I had to cut, but a lot. Look at the condition of this carrier. Inside here are bearings. Those will be replaced with the new carrier as well as the oil seals. And again, look at that. That was not fun. This part right there, that is the top portion that unfortunately I could not get a drill to, but in the end I didn't need it. So with that said, DIYers, we're making progress, but hey, we've got a long way to go. Definitely check out the link scrolling above. It's going to take you to the next video in our project. We'll pick up right where we left off. From here, do us a favor, below the video, you will see that thumbs up icon. Click on that, like the video, subscribe to the channel. Definitely ring your YouTube bell. That would be very helpful to us. We'd really appreciate it. Thanks again for watching. And I got some cleaning up to do.